Well, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the New Ground Life and Leadership podcast. Today I'm bringing you a slightly different podcast than our standard long-form just interview podcasts, as I wanted to share with you some of the reflections and insights that I gained from being involved with the recent conference run by New Day, a youth culture conference that took place at Westminster Chapel on February the 7th this year. How does its focus the subject of smartphones and social media, and wanting to think through how to disciple a generation of young people and how to think about how this technology is affecting us and shaping us. And of particular impact, I know, was an interview that I did with Dave Smith, a head teacher of a school in West London, Fulham Boys School. As head teacher of this school, was among one of the first state schools in the country to ban smartphones from the school life. And so I spent time talking to him and was really inspired by his example of courageous leadership in a space where, as he points out, it's not just that we have an anxious generation of young people growing up, we've also got an anxious generation of parents learning to parent in an age of smartphones. You can access that interview with Dave Smith and all of the content from the conference by subscribing to the Youth Culture mailing list, details about which we'll put in the description to today's episode. But for today's podcast, I've recorded a couple of conversations with two of the contributors from that day. Katherine and John Dutton shared with me some of their reflections about how they think smartphones and social media affect boys and girls, men and women, differently, and how we need to think through how to lead, love and disciple young people differently based on the way that smartphones and social media are impacting them. So there's two short interviews, one with Katherine and one with John, and then after that I want to introduce you to a couple of resources and organisations that I think could really serve you. Now, before I get to the interviews with John and Katherine, let me just share a brief summary of some of the helpful insights and questions that Matt Hosier gave us. Matt, who's the pastor of Gateway Church Poole and recently appeared on this podcast discussing Christian nationalism and a vision for political engagement, he shared a 15-minute address trying to offer what he called a theology of technology. As part of that address, he began by sharing 4 approaches and outlooks that we can take towards technologies. You can be pessimistic, optimistic, utopian, or mediating in terms of how you think about technology. That is, that you can think that technology is negative and never neutral. You can think that technology is neutral and can be used for good or for harm. You can have an attitude that says that technology is here to save us and solve all of human problems. Or you can have an attitude that sees technology as something that shape and improve the very substance of our lives. Those are different attitudes towards technology. And he talked about different forms of technology. Money, for example, is a technology. This is a neutral technology, can be used for harm or for evil. Pointed out that it's, of course, attitudes behind money that decide that. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And we know in Scripture that demonic forces are attached to a love of money and wealth, greed, mammon, that sort of thing. Books, he says, are a fundamentally positive technology. They help slow us down, increase our humanity, our connection with one another. And Matt's rather provocative thesis was that he thinks that smartphones are fundamentally an evil technology that can be used for good, rather than a good technology that can be used for evil. And there are positive aspects to smartphones, of course. They can fuel connection, they increase convenience, and they increase our capacity of things that we can do in the world. But there are significant drawbacks and negative aspects to smartphones. He says that smartphones are designed in their very nature, it's baked into the technology to be devices that distract us, that disassociate us from the people in our lives and even our own selves, and they fuel a dependency and an addiction on them. And that far from being a quirk of the technology, those 3 things, distraction, disassociation and dependency, are, as I say, baked in. That smartphones make us fundamentally less human. They thin out our humanity. And that's something that we really need to take seriously, engage with and think about. How serious are you about parenting your smartphone, shepherding your smartphone, putting restrictions and blockers on your smartphone? Very few of us are powerful enough to beat and to subdue the addictive algorithms that things like social media and the internet play on and utilize. We're going to think about what these technologies are doing to us. Matt gave us 4 diagnostic questions that are useful to think about when engaging with smartphones and any technology for that matter. Number 1, we should ask the question, does this technology weaken or strengthen embodied community? We're built for community. We're built to be with others. The image of God on the earth isn't an individual male or an individual female, but it's both together. The body of Christ on the earth is not one Christian, but the church, locally in congregations and globally. Do our technologies help strengthen or weaken that community and those embodied communities? And if they weaken it, how are we going to put in serious safeguards to prevent the destruction of that embodied community? Number 2, we should ask the question, does this technology deepen or shortcut spiritual formation? I've recently finished going through a book called Slow Theology, which I'd really recommend. It's a book that, again, makes this case. God is not in a hurry when answering your prayers. God is not in a hurry when making you into the image of Christ. He takes a lifetime. He wants a relationship with you. You can't rush intimate relationship. It requires a pace that is slow. Something like a smartphone makes us impatient, makes us feel like everything's a crisis and everything is a matter of urgency. We need to be aware of that. The third question is, does this technology increase or reduce our dependency on God? And the fourth question we should ask is, does this technology cultivate patience or impatience? 4 diagnostic questions for you to think about. Does your smartphone weaken or strengthen embodied community? Does it deepen or shortcut your spiritual formation? Does it increase or reduce your dependency on God? And does it cultivate patience or impatience? Some great questions. Finally, before my interviews, let me just say this. Many of us are aware of the charts, graphs and statistics on the negative impact of smartphone and social media on not just our health, but our young people's health. But there are positive statistics we also need to be aware of. Smartphone usage and social media usage, video game usage are proven to decrease happiness levels, overall contentment levels with our lives. By contrast, there are certain things, and I'll put a graph on the screen to show this from Jean Twangi's recent book, 10 Rules for Parenting in a High-Tech World. There's a graph that she shows that yes, there are things that decrease happiness levels. By contrast, there are several proven things that increase happiness levels. Number 1 is playing sport and doing recreational activity. Number 2, attending religious services is proven to increase happiness levels. Pastors, Christians, people in ministry, do you know that you are involved with and you help lead one of the only proven things that boost people's happiness, contentment and overall well-being levels in life? We shouldn't be surprised at this. The church is God's idea. It began in his heart and his mind, and he gives us good gifts for our enjoyment. And let's make much of this statistic that going to church, belonging to a Christian community will boost your happiness levels. There's more we could say about that. For now, let me hand over to my interview with John and Katherine, and then I'll share with you one technology that can help you and one organisation that I think is doing great work in this. Enjoy. Well, I am thrilled to be joined now by the wonderful, the indomitable, the influential, the inspiring, she pops up everywhere on all my social media streams these days, the wonderful Katherine Brown, who is fast becoming an influencer, although we're going to learn that that's not the right term for what we're talking about. She's rolling her eyes at me and desperately feeling awkward by my introduction so far. Katherine Brown works for the Evangelical Alliance and is responsible for emerging generations. Is that right? Is that okay title? Anyway, hello, Katherine.
Hello, Jez. That was, just the most awkward introduction I've ever had. Indomitable. What does that mean? I didn't even understand these words.
I know, it's the word that came to mind. Indomitable, like irrepressible, like unstoppable, the force of nature.
I don't know what the Lord would think about that.
Okay, I might cut that from
and
the
I'm
edit.
Here with Jez, the viral podcast host, taking the world of podcasts by storm.
Stop, it's my podcast. And Viral sounds too close to virus, which may be more accurate. The virus in people's earbuds. Anyway, Katherine, it's great to have you with us. We are doing a special episode considering the impact of smartphones and social media on young people looking at how to disciple emerging generations, the next generation, Gen Z, and all of that jazz, inspired by the recent youth culture conference that took place a few weeks ago now. And we had an interview as part of that with yourself and John Dutton about the impact of smartphones on, and particularly with an impact, a kind of angle of how smartphones and social media affect boys and girls differently from one another. And so I'm going to be talking to John in a moment to think about the impact on boys. But so much of what you said on the day was just kind of bang on the money and stuff, again, I'd not heard before, but I just thought it was so helpful. I wanted to get you on the podcast to share that with this wonderful audience. Katherine, can you kind of, answer, can you help us think through how social media and smartphones impact and influence girls differently from boys?
Yeah, definitely. I think whenever you talk in gender stereotypes, there's always the threat that then a lot of people will think, well, that's not me, so it can't be true. But I do think obviously there will be people left out of this stereotype, and it won't be true for absolutely every single teenage boy or every single teenage girl. But just through watching different teens in my life and looking at all of the different research that's come out about social media and smartphones and just some of the stats around girls and boys, I do think we can draw some conclusions that although they are stereotypes and are gender specific, they are quite helpful for us understanding just the young women in our lives, the girls in our lives, and how we can help them engage with the online world. So girls spend like so many more hours than boys on social media. Social media is a real pull for young girls. They absolutely love it. And I think for boys, the online world for them really is a sort of playground. And it can be a dark and dangerous playground. Obviously, we know that with things like porn and whatever, but it's a playground. Like they'll be sending each other funny memes, they'll be watching stupid videos, boxing videos, whatever it is, gaming, all of that. It's something just to consume and sort of like run riot around. For boys, it really is that sense of a like playground. It's something to have fun with and just like enjoy with your mates. But for girls, it's a very different place. It's really not a playground for girls. It's their stage. It's something that they are an active participant in the creation of. The questions that young girls are asking when they engage online is, am I measuring up? How am I presenting? Like when you see a girl post a picture online, particularly young women, you see all of these comments like flurry in where all of the girls are going, wow, you look amazing, you look so great, all the fire emojis, you're so hot, all of that. And it's sort of like there's this unspoken rule between girls that if I comment on your picture, you'll comment on mine. And if we're both commenting on each other's pictures and have loads of comments and loads of likes, everyone is going to perceive us as these amazing, popular, beautiful people. And that for girls is what they really, really want. And yeah, it is a stage for women, and particularly even if we're talking about like porn and stuff. So obviously there are lots of girls that have issues with porn as well. It's not just a male issue, but there are differences between girls and boys in this, where the boys are exposed to the content, just like the girls might be exposed to it as well, but the boys aren't tempted in the same way to become the object of it, to become the creators of it. Whereas for a young girl online, there is always the draw behind, what if I showed more flesh? What if I did this? What if I created this? Like, would more people like me? Would more people view it? Could I even make money off of that? So the pulls for boys and girls in the online world are very different.
Yeah, and it is interesting, you alluded earlier that social media does have a pull on girls in a way that it doesn't on boys. And the converse, or the kind of negative aspects of that, are the graphs that you see showing the declining impact on young girls' mental health as contrasted to boys. Boys' mental health has dipped in the last 10 years, but nothing like girls' mental health has, and it is correlated to number of hours spent on social media. I think there's quite strong correlation now, it seems, between if you spend more than 3 hours a day on social media, you have an 80% chance of becoming mentally depressed or experiencing negative adverse effects on your mental health. You shared on the day as well something that I just thought was really helpful for me as a guy, particularly just to understand what happens to girls as they grow and they go through puberty. They're changing relationship with themselves, their own bodies, and also with the world outside them, and how they understand that they're being perceived, and then how the internet seems to make that worse as well. Could you share that reflection for us?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, body image has always been a thing for women, but social media amplifies that. And every single woman, as they get into the teenage years, as they hit puberty, they have this really strange experience where you attract male attention for the first time. And some people absolutely love it, and some people absolutely hate it. And every single woman has a reaction to that and interaction with that, and figuring out, right, how do I navigate this rapidly changing body, rapidly changing interactions and reactions with the world around me. But on social media, it's not just like a few men that you might pass in the street, in public, when you're with your friends, when you're with your family. It's in the hidden world. It's thousands potentially. It's in the DMs, it's in the private messaging, it's in the likes, it's in the saves. You post a picture and you're like, well, this picture's had 4 saves. And I don't know who saved it. Like, what? Who could that be? And for many young women, that is a strange experience, or very exciting and appealing experience. And so there's a pull there as well to be seen, or to not be seen, and to retreat completely, or to feel very uncomfortable about being seen, or to think, oh, well, it's just my peers, the boys that I know at school, that are seeing it, but their profiles are public, and so actually they don't realize, no, it's a whole load of people you don't know who might not be your age at all who are seeing this and viewing this. And even outside of that, I think just body image wise, when we're talking about social media, when we're talking about statistics, like eating disorders, especially post-COVID, are just off the charts. There's been a massive rise in loads of different types of disordered eating. And I think a huge part of that is just increased online time. There is more opportunity for girls to compare themselves to others. And the pictures that they're seeing online aren't like, the magazines that I grew up with, that I clearly knew, well, this is a model, it's probably been edited. Like, I could rationalize that as a 14-year-old. Like, I'm not a model in a magazine. Like, that's fine. I just had one girl in my class or whatever that I was like, I wish I was her. But for girls now, they have loads of people to compare themselves with who look like ordinary people, and they're showing all of their life. So they're like, well, they also do this, I do that, and they're like a normal person online like me, and yet I don't look like them. But for loads of those women, they've had plastic surgery or are airbrushing or whatever it is. So it's just a very interesting world and challenging world for young girls.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it just then as well, that you mentioned that you're in the minority among your peers, certainly outside of the church, in that you're not someone who's considering Botox or something like that. And the rise of surgical interventions in beauty treatment to delay the effects of aging seems to be like, just, I don't know, it seems to have hit some kind of apex at the moment. It's very, very popular. It's everywhere. And it becomes very normal that people think, oh, it's perfectly okay to, I want to say, mutilate my face, but I know that's a bit harsh, but that is what's going on. And it seems to be fueled by internet culture. Is that something you'd have observed as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look online at the girls online, you're seeing one type of face because they've had lip fillers or, sort of Botox things or different cheek fillers and things. So there is a look, and because it is augmented, you can't get that look without being augmented, without the fake tan, without the fake lips. So you can then feel like, I'm missing out. Like, oh no. And for me, obviously, I'm not a teenager anymore. I just turned 30. My friends, like you said, who aren't Christians, that it's a no-brainer. They're like, well, why wouldn't you get preventative Botox? It's cheap, it's easy, like there's not that many side effects that we know of. Like, why wouldn't you just go for it? I'm like, oh man, but I'm not attached to beauty or beauty in the way that they would view it, which is just youth, and you have to look youthful forever. It's like, no, I'm actually okay with how God has created us to age and to show, to have lines on our faces which show the experiences we've had and the joy that we've had and the hard things we've been through, and allow the grey hair to come through. Like, it's okay. But even in processing that is a challenge in my mind that I have to constantly do the battle of the mind stuff for. Like, it is okay, Katherine, that you do not look like the social media girls. It is okay that you do not have lip fillers. It is okay that you don't have a fake tan right now, which is crazy. But I think for lots of women, even women like me, that would be the internal battle and monologue that you have a lot of the time. It's okay. No, it's fine. It's okay. But for lots of women, especially young ones, they can't do that. They don't have the capability or maturity to do that self-talk. They just think, I want to look like that, and I'm gonna, as soon as I can, I will.
It's really helpful, and I really like your metaphor of helpfully helping us to see that social media and the online world is a stage for young women, and therefore there is this constant pressure to perform, be perfect in appearance, in comments, in playing the game, and the danger of that is an increasing alienation with themselves, like a treating of their appearance themselves as an object, to play the part of being an object. And I think that's a really helpful metaphor that you've drawn out. So what are some of these are some of the things that I think, people are very aware of, and we need to help young girls see more explicitly, disciple young girls to be conscious of and actively kick against, particularly if it's going to be an important battlefield for the battle for the mind for a Christian woman, shall we say. Well, are there any positives of this new landscape of social media, and what are some of the ways that you think Christian young women can use it for their discipleship and evangelism?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it was just the picture I've painted, we should all get off social media. Like, no women should be on social media ever, because that is all awful stuff. Can it lead to any good would be the question. And those are the questions I was asking a while back. And I decided actually to come off all social media. I didn't delete my accounts, but I just, for months and months and months was just like totally not engaged with it. And I that was a really positive experience for me. It was great. And I think having a time away is a really good idea. And for some people, they need to stay away from it forever. But as I was journeying through that time, I felt a sense of conviction from the Lord, firstly through conversations with some non-Christians I know who were referencing stuff that was happening online. And I had absolutely no clue what they were on about. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know these trends. I feel really left out, which for some people, that's okay. It's okay to be left out. You don't need to watch everything. You don't need to know everything. But I was really wanting to engage with these people evangelistically. And I felt like I'm not swimming in the same water as you. Like, I don't understand what's going on, so I have no framework for offering a countercultural God story back to you, or I don't even know what questions to ask. So I just started to feel increasingly like left out and not understanding what's going on in culture. And then as I was reading Acts 17 and just looking at how Paul does spend time walking around the marketplace before then speaking into culture, I realized like that is what I want to do. If I want to speak into culture, I need to be where the marketplace is, and I don't see any other marketplace than social media. It was really where we see all of the different ideas, all of the different things that make our culture tick, all of the different creativity and whatever. So I think social media is a really helpful place if you're engaging with it intentionally and for a purpose, and not not just there as a consumer and as an addict, because that's what I was before, but engaging with it as someone who wants to actually speak into the culture or wants to learn from it for a purpose. So that's where I shifted into. And you can't deny it's great for evangelism. Like, I don't know about you, Jez, but in my church, basically all the baptism testimonies we've had recently have had something about the online world. I watched this video online, I watched this debate, this guy, he's amazing, and I found it so helpful. Like, there are people, girls and boys, who are becoming Christians because they've seen things online. And we have an opportunity to use the online space really wisely and evangelistically for the glory of God. So I think it can be really good. And then for girls, like, it's creativity. Like, they could see women who are interested in things that no one in their church is interested in, whether that be something to do with the sciences or something to do with the sports. I think that can be really helpful for girls as well, that sort of representation. And then I do love it when the students in my church, they're all creatives, make like funny things online or really powerful things or just different creative things. I'm like, this is good. This is a great way for them to express themselves and to create lots of different things. Like, why not? So I think it can be good, but I think you do need to be careful.
Yeah, as you were speaking, it was reminding us of a conversation I had on here years ago now with a former Zen Buddhist monk called Ellis Potter. I really enjoyed that conversation. But I remember him saying, like, as Christians, we want there to be like safe and unsafe spaces. But he says that's not how we should see the world. There isn't safe and unsafe. Instead, like, you could go to church. You remember him saying, like, going to church isn't safe. You could lust over that person there. You could feel jealous about that person there. Like, there isn't a safe and unsafe place. And it's the same with the media that we consume. We want it to be safe, Christian, wholesome media, which often is just bad media, bad art, and we want it to be unsafe, like secular stuff. And like, I just don't think that's how the world should be divided up. Instead, I remember Ellis Potter saying, as Christians, we need to teach one another to just stay awake to the things that we're consuming and to not be mindless and allow things to just influence us unthinkingly. And that's part of what's happening when people are just doom scrolling, is they're absorbing stuff without thinking about it critically at all. And yet everything we do, the Apostle Paul says, whether I eat or drink, I should be trying to do it to the glory of God, which means, as you rightly point out, is thinking, how can I engage with this as a creative artist in the world, creating culture, or just using it to share the good news of Jesus, using it as an expression of worship, as an expression of using the gifts that God's given me. Those are important things as Christians that we're meant to do. And I really like the kind of little critique polemic you set up as well between whether or not you should even ever be a Christian quote unquote influencer. I know you're being polemical and deliberately so, but just draw out that point for us as we come into land.
Yeah, I would say we don't need Christian influencers, because the idea of an influencer is you're building a brand over which people are attracted to that brand, which the brand is you, and then from it you can then influence them into doing the things you're doing. Now, some people would argue and say, well, isn't that just the imitate me as I imitate Christ type stuff? And I'd say no, because it's not imitate my lifestyle. It's you physically as well. Social media is such a physical, I'm looking at your face, I'm looking at your clothes, I'm looking at what your house looks like, I'm looking at that. It is also let me create myself to be looking exactly like you. But also, do we want online for our kids and youth to be discipled by those online? Well, probably not. We don't want them to imitate themselves off of these online Christian influencers. But where I do think that Christians can step into the digital space and make a real difference is by seeing themselves and being digital missionaries. So it's not that you're trying to build this massive brand online. It's not that you're trying to build a massive following, but you've done some work, some cross-cultural mission training, as it were, to understand a bit of the online world, to then try something new to speak into that space and to speak missionally and prophetically and provocatively, like to provoke something of what is going on in that that space and to provoke some of the cultural norms in that space and to bring something of the light and life of Jesus, but it not to be about you and your image and your influence, but to be all about Jesus. And I talk about this with my students all the time, who are like drama school students, who are like wanting to obviously build brands where they're noticed, because that's the only way you make it in the world. And they're wonderful followers of Jesus and really want to honor him. And so there has to be a different approach for them in the way that they build their performance actor brand to the way that they then talk about Jesus. It can't be the same clickbait. It can't be the same, look at me, I'm so beautiful, and that's why you should follow Jesus. It has to be Christ-centered and Christ-focused, which is a different way of doing stuff online. But I think that you work out as you go. And I think if Christians are so worried about that, and it stops them from sharing their faith online, that's not ideal either. So I'd say if you're wanting to like share your faith online, just go for it. And the reality is none of us are going to get that big anyway. But we might reach one or two people, and that's wonderful. And that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether, thousands see it or whether it's just your two mates who are scrolling online. Like, go for it, create stuff for the kingdom of God.
Man, that's really great. I think a really helpful comment and point to leave it on, isn't it? We because of the online space, because we see videos with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views or millions of subscribers, we think that's what we all should have. But actually, like you said, in normal life, in a village, if you can know 150 people, that's your limit. If you could share a video or something that 100 people engage with, like, wow, that's huge. That's like almost all the village that you would have lived in before this time. And those are the sorts of numbers that we're meant to engage with and relate to as well. Wonderful. Katherine, there's so much more I could talk to you about, but I just wanted a snapshot of your thought. Thank you for everything. Thanks for what you're doing. We're praying for you, cheering you on, and God bless you.
Thanks, Jez. God bless.
Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to be joined today by John Dutton, who's a youth worker at Bethany Community Church in Harpenden. John joined me recently at the Youth Culture Conference when we talked about the impact of social media and smartphones on young people. John, as a youth worker and as a father, is particularly passionate about discipling young men to grow up into being godly followers of Christ and healthy contributors to society, shall we say. Well, John, before we talk about the impact of smartphones on boys and how that differs from, say, the impact on girls and what some of the unique challenges are that face boys, I'd love to just kind of get your reflections on why you think we ought to be motivated by, interested in, concerned about the discipleship of boys and young men, and why it's something that you're particularly passionate about.
Yeah, so I think in terms of my story, I think I didn't grow up in church, so and I've seen the devastating effects that young men can have if they aren't like discipled, they aren't led, they aren't given a vision of what it means to be a man in the world following after Jesus. And so I've seen, if I'm honest, I've seen a dearth of kind of young men coming through in terms of leadership and across the church, and I'm in some ways wanted to be a part of the solution to that, address that, and see and try to understand partly why that is the case, and then reach out and serve young people and serve young men to model a vision of hopefully of godly masculinity, but also in terms of raising them up and equipping them and giving them and encouraging them into a healthy vision of that. And I think as well, I think we're kind of culturally coming out of a season of understanding what a masculine kind of role looks like, and for good reason, and I think, but equally there can be a sense of ungroundedness that young men can have in the world, and a sense of I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be, what my role is in society. So in some ways, it's trying to help them find a space, find a way to live in the world, and into a healthy vision that ultimately encourages them to serve Jesus, serve his church, and see fruitfulness happen in the world, essentially. So that's why I'm passionate about.
Wonderful. A great vision and something that I fully support and am enthusiastic about myself. Well, as someone who works with young people, boys and girls, and no doubt you've seen the impact over the past 10 years or so of smartphones and social media. What are some of your reflections on how you see this technology affect boys, say, differently from girls?
I think particularly there's three things that I think have a more obvious impact on young guys based on, I think, their biological makeup, and things they're more predisposed to, that they would find to be something they're affected by. So I think the first one, and I think one that probably isn't thought about a lot, is the ecosystem of social media is one where I think it pushes to the top is a sense of kind of algorithmic anger that I think we kind of know about rage baiting. We kind of know about, like, thinking of example of the Twitter and thinking that is kind of like, I've heard the terms like thinking it was a cesspool of anger and rage and political kind of like back and forths about stuff. I think we see the polarization across our Western world and in many parts of the world in terms of social media. And I think that kind of place where young people and young men find themselves inhabiting, I think that does have a formative effect on them. And I think it does cause them to have, I think what young men, I think, are predisposed to have more predisposed to aggression and outward forms of aggression than young women would be, and women in general. So I think what social media kind of provides is a leaf blower to that kind of predisposition. And I think young men now are performed by that kind of vision of, I don't know, us versus them, that vitriolic kind of anger. And I think that can just seep into the way we kind of interact with the world and engage with the world. So it's, again, this us versus them kind of dynamic. We're for this and we're against this. And I think I've seen that particularly, young men. I think one of the ways, I think, is post kind of the kind of like manosphere kind of stuff. A lot of that kind of rhetoric in the manosphere was to do with, girls are kind of like, I think, in kind of response to maybe some of the aspects of the feminist movement, like an overcorrection from a men's side, was to kind of see women as an opposition, to kind of look at them and think they're kind of against us, not really for us. They're, we're not really with us. So there's a sense of reticence almost with young women sometimes, and with other women, they look at them in a kind of an oppositional way. And I wouldn't say that's true of all men, of course, but I mean, that's something I definitely see online and see as part of the rhetoric. I think particularly there's a more of a tribalistic sense within young men online. And I think with the manosphere now as well, coming back to that, I think that while the kind of key figures of that, like Andrew Tate, the kind of sneakos of the kind of things of the past, I think that kind of stuff, I think, has, with the kind of key figures of that, kind of disappeared, or at least their influence has waned a lot. But I think some of that philosophy that they were kind of preaching and kind of teaching young men and creating the space for those ideas, I think while they're less kind of on the surface of things on social media, they're very much underground, very much still part of the debates and dialogues and discussions. So I think it's something to be aware of within that. I think on the other aspects, the other two, I think there's a relational withdrawal, which I think is just the kind of reality of smartphones in general. You disconnect from those around you, you're more absorbed in phones, and I think that is part of the kind of the way smartphones are designed to kind of just absorb your life and not particularly cause you to look at those around you and be relationally present within the room. But also, I think it's just a way of, is a sense of escapism within that as well. And I think it has an effect of isolation on young men for the long term. And the last one, I think, is the absolute proliferation in our society of pornography. I think there's, for young men, pornography, and the broadest definition of that term, which is explicit content designed for sexual arousal. And so that isn't just X-rated websites. That's everything that's online. That's, I think, every young person, every young man you see you'll ask them on their smartphones, do they have pornographic kind of like images and videos that appear on their feeds, as they scroll through TikTok, as they scroll through Reels? I think the vast majority would say yes. The kind of like dynamics of pornography is it's not something that kind of stays as kind of one, but it stays in one place. It often tries to pull you further into it and get you into more darker and more dehumanizing visions of pornography. And I think that, again, that causes a dehumanizing effects as they look at other women in the world. As their objectification has great effects on young men as they and that equally it kind of creates a cycle of shame and isolation as well as. So I think in some ways it exacerbates some of the other issues as well. So I think in those kind of problems, I think those are the three key ones I would say for young men, which is an increase in aggression and oppositional hostility to the world and those around them potentially. And then a withdrawal, and then pornography becoming an even greater issue that I think young men face. So yeah, I think those would be the three ones, or three.
Wow,
three key points.
that's massive, isn't it? That's an unholy trinity and unhealthy cocktail that so many of our boys, and not just our boys, us as men, are consuming on such a regular basis. There's so much that you've said there that we could kind of drill into a little bit more. I think it's a really helpful explanation or definition of pornography as something that broadens it beyond simply just X-rated websites. I think it's a really helpful reminder, actually, because, as you said, very few people might say they explicitly sit down and access pornographic websites and videos. But like you said, a lot of people are exposed to images that are designed for sexual arousal on a regular basis, whether intentionally seeking it out or it just popping up. And so that does fuel things within us. And I think it's interesting because, men and women are different. We are made differently. Those differences aren't as pronounced as sometimes people make out, but there are real differences. And I think one of the key differences, it seems, between two of the key differences. One is obviously the higher testosterone levels in men. I think a teenage boy has 20 times as much testosterone as a teenage girl during puberty. And testosterone, we know, is the thing that fuels competitiveness, fuels aggression, and it's a useful gift from God to help men fight, provide, survive. And so we have this tool that, as you rightly point out, activates much of that kind of testosterone that's surging through young boys' systems, giving them something to fight. And I think then coupled with this other component that I think is something that's different between men and women is that. So I remember reading a book about brains on this, and the neuroscientist pointed out that women are able to read the world socially at deeper levels than men typically do. They can, but they don't a lot of the time. Women understand the nuances in social interactions in ways that men often don't see as naturally. They don't read it as quickly. That sort of thing would be fairly obvious to anyone who's married or just watched interactions. But what I kind of pick up from that is that men are more inclined to the danger of objectification than women are, because we are more likely to see the world as objects than as people, as persons. And then we have a device that is exacerbating or turning up that lack of sociability within a boy that sees the world as objects and has testosterone that helps him relate to those objects as, things to compete against, beat, subdue. I don't know. What do you think about some of those reflections?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's very true. I think it does. I think the testosterone in young men does kind of, I think, increase our levels of aggression and increase our levels of, I think, like sociability. I think there is a sense in which there's a skill, much more of a skill to learn for young men in terms of relating to each other and relating to women. I think we need a lot more training and a lot more support in that dynamic to build decent friendships, to build real brotherhood. I think really does take a lot of work for young men. And I think it's something that's very much worth the investment, very much worth the time. But I do think you're right. I think there is a sense in which we kind of struggle a little bit more to kind of read social situations, and we tend to think of things very analytical rather than kind of like the kind of connections within stuff and the implications of certain things as well. We might, I don't know, even just for example, I was chatting to a young lad the other day, and he was just like completely unaware and oblivious of something he had said and just the consequences of what that might mean. And he was, I think somebody got quite offended and he was just completely oblivious to it. So we just had to walk him through, this is why that's what it felt like, this is what this would have meant, all that kind of stuff. And I think I've heard that story seen in my own life. I've seen that story happen in many other young people's life and young men's life where they've, just not seen the implications of their actions. They've not felt the desire almost sometimes to connect with other guys and see the real value that has to be almost something that's taught, and they have to catch a vision of, and they have to see the benefit of almost before they give the investment, which for young women, I'd very much almost see the opposite. They almost see that as something uniquely valuable and uniquely something to prioritize very much from themselves. In some ways, that seems something they always continue to invest in, which obviously, there's variability within that. And, we can't pretend to generalize. I think that's always something we try to do. But I think there is a general kind of view that I think is true of most, which I think is the challenge sometimes.
And I think one of the things that Matt Hosier pointed out at the conference was that this technology, it's designed by its very nature to distract, to disassociate, and to fuel dependency on it as an object, which are things that will therefore affect these, or they will exacerbate the differences between men and women in this respect. And, Katherine talked about her observation that for young girls, social media is a stage, but for young boys, it's a playground. Talk to me about where you see this playground dynamic playing out and how that can both be a good thing and a bad thing, maybe in your own son's lives or the teenagers that you work with.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Catherine's point, which I really resonated with and really I thought was an excellent idea of how young women and young boys kind of approach social media, or at least see it. I see that very much true within my youth group. I see that very much true within what kind of the stories I hear online. But I think for young guys, I think they do, approach again social media from a playground kind of point of view. They see it as a place to enjoy, to consume, to kind of run wild, pick up different random crazy stuff that they see online, and I think and kind of and be part of trends and all that kind of stuff. That I think they really do enjoy that sense of like running into social media and kind of getting as much of it as they can to kind of like share. And then there is a sense of connection they can have with others on those things. But yeah, it's kind of sometimes the more wild, the more kind of like in group you can be, I think the better really. So, and I think there is positives of that. I think the positives are, I think the kind of like, because of the consumption rate that I think some young people have, it tends to that they get such a breadth of information that they are facing. So one of the things that we're seeing because of that, I think we're seeing as young people kind of follow the rabbit trail of social media and they kind of also interact with the world. I think young men, particularly, I think seem to be. I don't know. I haven't really thought about the reasons why, per se, but have kind of, I think, because of maybe because of the lack of engagement in the world and that kind of stuff, and I think they're and the forces that are around that are pushing them to that. I think there is a sense within what they're experiencing from their algorithms is a desire for more purpose, for a better vision of life, and so their algorithms are kind of feeding them stuff along those lines. So, and I think one of the ways we've seen that happen is through being exposed to Christian content, as well as lots of very different content from different parts. Muslim content as well. Islamic content is very like massive on social media, and it is also very effective towards young men, offering them a sense of discipline, offering them a sense of purpose, offering them a sense of value in terms of what their role they can play in society. And Christian content likewise does the same online. So I think the amount of conversations I've had with young men about people like Cliff Connectley or Wes Huff, of people that are just again tackling with real issues, with real ideas within the Christian faith, and then making that really accessible to young men, I think has been really amazing to watch. Actually, we've seen particularly in our kind of like context, we've seen particularly one young person come to faith because of just watching Cliff Connectley videos online and chatting to his friends at school and having a good Christian friend in his life that is able to kind of help him discover Jesus. And I think that has been something that has been, I think we've seen that story multiplied over many times of young people, young men scrolling through social media, getting Christian content, exploring that, thinking about that. And I think we've seen that massively in loads of different circles as well. Like, I think we've seen like even people that they're kind of like the massive figures within the podcast world of Joe Rogan, like inviting Christians on and having discussions of that, really kind of like breaking down his kind of walls to Christianity and the things that he would have, because he was very vitriolic against Christianity for a long time, and we've seen his journey kind of be a bit more accepting. And I think he's kind of a good kind of like idea of what is happening in young men across the world. Is he's on a similar journey of young men are longing for purpose, longing for and seeing kind of secularism fail, and seeing the technology that we're kind of idea of how we kind of want to live in the world, that technology would lead us to, or the innovation of technology would lead us to some form of utopia, except it seems to be doing the exact opposite. It seems to be actually leading us to more destruction. So, and I think young men are like, well, what's the answer? What do I give my life to? Where do I go? And I think then, funny enough, the same platforms that they feel dissatisfied by or not leading them to a sense of utopia are also the ones feeding them to Christian content and other content as well. So I think that the negatives as well, I think that purpose can get itself molded into other stuff. I think the manosphere being a great example of that, young men being pushed to find their purpose in people that might have a few good things good to say, but it's almost like the kind of bait on the hook that then pulls them into something much darker. I think we see that with the Andrew Tates. We've seen that with the kind of other people within the manosphere, drawing them into a purpose that I think is destructive. That is I think is much more about exacerbating their immaturity than offering them a vision of maturity. So those would be the kind of things I think in terms of how young people engage in the playground has been a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think the playground image is useful. I see my boys, they wake up with 7, 8 a.m. They can be on PlayStation, talking to their friends in the other side of the town, playing combat games together. And there's great things there. It is a camaraderie, but of course there isn't any real world achievement that they're engaging with. It's fictitious. So you feel like you're growing, you feel like you're achieving, but you're not actually mastering any real skills. And as much as there is a degree of sociability that you're learning, it's very thin. You're not learning to look people in the eye and read body language, facial expression, which again, as we've said earlier, is something that boys struggle with on the whole a lot more than girls. It's interesting as well, the people that you mentioned just then as well, some of the key influencing men in the podcast world like Joe Rogan, and I think to a certain extent Wes Huff as well. They're both athletic-looking men who look fairly typically masculine. I think Joe Rogan was a fighter, wasn't he, beforehand? And so that's quite interesting that there is a coming together of like an intellectual rigorousness of debating and discussing ideas, combat in the ideas realm that's appealing to men, being exemplified by athletic-looking males who are also saying, discipline and training to look good and to take good use of the gift of your masculinity. Then I think what's probably needed, as you're saying, is the Christian vision for what to do with your masculinity, how to use it, what purpose to have, to use that as a vision for serving of others, for sacrifice and for lifting up, protecting the weak and for lifting them up, is something that I think we probably need a bit more. We need a few more influences in the Christian side saying that, because yes, there is spiritual discipline that appeals to us, a bit like, as you pointed out, in Islam, there's an emphasis on the 5 pillars and do this and do that. There's a Christian equivalent of do these spiritual things. Again, there's some value and merit in that, but the question is always, but what's it all for? What are we fighting for? Where are we going? It can't just be for personal well-being and personal, wholeness and health. That's not going to satisfy. We are designed to affect change in the world, and so I'd just love to get your kind of closing reflections on discipling young boys. Then how you help create a distinctly Christian vision of what living for God looks like, and how it appeals to young men, some of the things that you might do in a youth work setting to engage with young boys and help them see the gospel's applicability to their life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing that I think a lot of churches should take on would be to look at the young men and find a way to come alongside them as individuals, to encourage them into a space of one-on-one discipleship or 2-on-1, or and find great role models, great men that are embodying and are modeling what it is to follow Jesus in a loving and sacrificial way. That isn't all bravado. That isn't kind of like all, that isn't trying to kind of like give a worldly vision of masculinity that is, again, all bravado and all kind of like the characteristics without the character, really. I think what young men really need is people to model it in gentleness, in humility, in love, in sacrificing, laying down your life for the sake of others, in building a better world, and leaving one behind. And I think those are the kind of things that my encouragement would be to get alongside young men, really hear their hearts, hear their context, particularly because they live in such a different world to us. Gen Z, even from me as millennial, I think Gen Z very much live in a very landscape that I think has its own unique challenges that I think we need to hear and we need to understand, and then support them within that kind of framework, which I think it involves a lot of listening, and I think it's hard to do when you're just teaching from a front in terms of a room of 30 people or 40 people, or in terms of the front of the church, all that kind of stuff. I think that's really important. So I think with me, when I meet with young men on an individual level or in a kind of a smaller group setting within one-to-one, I basically just get to go through them and say, like, what's the vision of manhood? What kind of man do you want to be, really? What's the vision you're chasing after, really? And get them to give them time to self-reflect upon that, and write something down. I give them a framework of like 5 or 6 different questions and say, and write down what's the kind of thing you want to work towards. What's the kind of vision? And ultimately we do that through scripture. We do that through conversation. We look at what Jesus is like. His model is obviously what we're running after in terms of the man, Jesus Christ, as well. He laid his life down for us. And so, and I think it's that kind of stuff that we go through. So I go through lots of questions with them and just kind of tease that out. And then we kind of figure out the roadmap, how to get there, really, which is through discipline, which is through commitment, which is through hard work, it's through showing up. It's through, taking on spiritual practices. It's all those kind of things. Paul said, discipline yourself for the sake of godliness. So that's where we would go on those fronts. So I think it's having those kind of conversations, challenging young men. They really want a vision to stand up. They really want to be challenged. They really want someone to just get alongside them and tell them the hard truth. They really do. I think young men want to grapple with hard things. They want to do hard things. And I think they need someone to encourage them and challenge them and push them towards the right things. Because I think that aggression that is within young men, I think, can be channeled towards really constructive things. I think it can be channeled towards the church, towards the kingdom, towards breaking and kind of combating and going against idols within the world, within their society they see, in really healthy ways as well. Healthy engagement, not just engagement that's full of bravado. And I think within our youth group, I think we really try and give opportunities to leadership, but only on the basis of character. So we always go after character. We're always wanting to kind of, for when young people are given a place of leadership, we really it's based on their character, not on their gifting. If they might have good gifts, and that's fine. They might have good communication gifts. They might have the kind of like the most extroverted character that's more magnetic than the next person, but in some ways the character is much more significant to us. So we'd give responsibility, we'd challenge them, we'd get them to turn up on time, all these kind of things. We would really look to challenge young men in and push them towards just using the gifts God's given them and encouraging them and giving them the loving kick up the backside that they need sometimes, which I think is just, I needed it and all men need it. So I think it's those kind of things that we'd go after, particularly with young men, is giving them a place to be challenged and also then challenging them. There's those kind of things. I think that's how I'd summarize it.
Man, that's brilliant. And it's really helpful to be reminded of that Jesus does invite us to this great adventure and this great mission to make disciples of all nations. And I think it's on us as leaders and disciplers of men and young men to cast a compelling enough vision for them, not to make one up, but to actually help them to see Jesus's vision is compelling enough. Just as you're speaking, I don't know your journey, but my journey from a non-Christian home into church leadership was done on the basis of a vision for the local church got hold of my heart, and I thought, this is worth running after and giving my life to. Helping Jesus's people fulfill the mission that Jesus gave them is global, it's brilliant, it's big, it's massive. You're never going to achieve it, and you're going to need all the people around you. And it's also historical. It's got traditional legacy. It connects you with the past to a much bigger purpose than your life. And I think for all the great work that charities do, all the great work that parachurch organizations do, I'm a local church man, because I think right at the heart and the center of it all of the good initiatives out there all come back to the hub of Jesus's plan to make disciples of all nations, anchored within local church fellowships under spiritual authority, godly leaders, where men and women flourish together. That's my vision, and I'm sure it's yours as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. On nail on the head. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, John, it's been lovely to connect with you briefly like this. Thanks so much for sharing with us what you did on that day, and I look forward to seeing you again. You're going to be speaking at New Day and helping facilitate a series of seminar teachings for boys, particularly about godly masculinity. So we're really looking forward to that. So if churches haven't yet signed up or got involved in New Day, I'd encourage them to do that. God bless you, John. Thank you. Well, folks, there you have it. I hope you found those interviews helpful. Some great insights and comments from both John and Katherine. I'm so grateful for them and their time. I just want to leave you with 2 quick resources and things. Firstly, I want to point you in the direction of an organisation that I think is really interesting. It's a grassroots, community-based, community-led activist organisation called the Smartphone Free Childhood. They are advocating for creating communities of parents who delay giving their children smartphones until the appropriate age. There's some great resources, some great videos on their website that I'll leave in the description to today's episode. I'd really want to encourage you to find out more about this organisation, Smartphone Free Childhood, and particularly engage with some of their videos, educating and upskilling us in thinking about this technology. The second thing I want to make you aware of is something that I've not long come across myself, but is making great impact on our family and our home at the moment. It's this organisation called Bloom, and specifically the Bloom card, which is something that you buy online. It's a metal card like this, which then operates effectively as a car key to start your phone. Simply by tapping the card on the phone, it activates a block mode whereby certain apps are unavailable to me. I use it myself to help me focus and be free from distractions, but as a parent I'm using it with my children to help them moderate their screen usage. You cannot unlock the phone without this card, and so I keep it on my person. I can set up schedules that mean my kids aren't bombarded by social media and apps all throughout the day. And most useful is because of the scheduling feature, I know that my kids can't access their phone through the night. If they wake up in the middle of the night, they can't go downstairs and just start going on TikTok, because I keep this card hidden from them with me. I should say I'm not sponsored by Smartphone Free or Bloom, but there's a couple of resources that I think are useful. What are you finding helpful? We'd love to know. Do leave comments in the description to today's episodes, or get in touch with us with podcast@newgroundchurches.org with some of your tips and recommendations on how to disciple young people in the area of smartphones and social media. Let's create churches, let's create youth groups that are taking a lead in this regard and are not just waiting for the laws to be passed, but instead are saying we believe enough in the well-being of a generation that we're going to take action to safeguard their well-being, preserve their humanity, and hopefully point them to Christ and his vision for their life more fully. God bless you. Thanks so much for being with us today. I hope you found today's episode helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless. Bye.